Hello, I'm Susan Elliott, the News and Special Reports Editor for Musical America. Today, we're talking with Ara Guzelimian, who is the Artistic and Executive Director of the Ojai Music Festival. Festival runs June 9 through 12. This is its 76th season. And Ara is going to talk about some of the festival's highlights, but also about the location and short duration of Ojai, how it makes it one of the most important laboratories for experimentation in the performing arts. Hello, Ara. How are you?
I'm well, Susan. How nice to be with you.
Yeah, same here. So you've got some pretty exciting stuff coming into town very soon. And you are now, this is your second year as your most recent appointment as Artistic and Executive Director. Yeah. You've done this in the past. You were in the 90s. You had the same job, no?
I was artistic director in the 90s, from 92 through 97. I've remained involved at Ojai in one capacity or another, most often doing the talks during the festival pretty consistently since then, and have the great good fortune of returning as both artistic and executive director. The two festivals that I am responsible for, last year was the 75th anniversary of the festival, the 75th festival, and this year is actually the 75th anniversary. The festival was founded in 1947, and it was very important to me with these two festivals to ground it in a certain way and establish the next chapter. And last year, the music director was John Adams, who was last in Ojai in 1993. And John arguably occupies the same senior position in American musical life as Aaron Copland once did. And he's the quintessential California composer. So I wanted the festival to come home in a sense last year. And we collaborated with the Los Angeles Philharmonic New Music Group, Los Angeles Chamber Orchestra, as well as a small festival orchestra with LA musicians. But John, to his credit, absolutely wanted nothing of a retrospective. I will just add in parentheses, John was born the same year as the Ojai Festival, but the only argument we had was about playing any of his music. And what he wanted to do was focus attention on 6 younger composers from the US and Mexico. And so that was dandy and served as a homecoming. And if John, as one bookend, was really kind of the central figure of American music at a senior level, still very much vibrant, of course, I wanted this year to be even more pointedly about. It's tempting to say amuck are the artists of the future, but the reality is amuck are the artists of the present. Yeah. And I very much wanted this year to bookend in that way and move us future forward, if you will.
And how is I'm hard pressed to think of a way to get much more forward than AMOC. They are amazing. They're just amazing. So this cross-disciplinary thing that they do, I mean, they're what, dancers and choreographers and musicians and composers, producers, all of the hot people, Julia Bullock and Matthew McCoy, etc. Does this mean that you all will be branching out in the future to other disciplines or additional disciplines? Does this mean that the sort of cross-genre, cross-discipline trend that they seem to epitomize is something in Ojai's future?
I think it's inevitably so. It's tempting to say that the present generation of creative musicians speak multiple musical languages, because they do. They're equally at home. It's sort of genre boundaryless, if you will, or borderless. And the same applies to their relationship to different disciplines. It's not a first in Ojai's history. Mark Morris was music director at Ojai about 8 years ago, I think, if I'm remembering the year correctly. And even the very first Ojai festival was meant to be Salzburg-like, with theater, not quite opera. So there are little bursts of multidisciplinary life, but I think it's much more the order of today now among younger musicians. It's interesting. One of the most revealing things Zach Winokur and Matt O'Coin have talked about is why opera in their title, American Modern Opera Company.
Right.
And my slightly tongue-in-cheek claim is they just wanted the acronym AMOC because it's irresistible. And I think there is an element of that.
Oh, yes, sounds that way.
But they've talked very eloquently about the beginnings of opera in 1600. The Florentine Camerata was, if you will, multidisciplinary artists getting together and combining disciplines. So they would say that they're being true to the sense of opera in its original incarnation. And so it's hard for me to argue that. It's a pretty irresistible argument. One of the biggest luxuries of the Ojai Festival is that it's curatorially driven, and the curator is the music director each year. My title is artistic director, and I just have the luxury of appointing and working with a different music director each year. And the character and the identity of the festival changes in a very pronounced way with each festival. So I think it will continue to vary. I suspect we will have more strictly music-oriented years and multidisciplinary years, depending on the natural inclinations of subsequent music directors. And similarly, I would even say with genre as well.
I guess speaking of this year's festival, we should talk a little bit about it and some of the highlights. If it's possible to single out, like 3 or 4 of them that are just irresistible. Although it all sounds pretty amazing to me. I still wish I was there. Anyway, go ahead.
It's hard to pick pure highlights, but I'll do my best.
Okay.
There's a new reconceiving of Olivier Messiaen's Harawi with Julia Bullock and the pianist Connor Hannock, but directed by Zach Winokur and choreographed by Bobby Jean Smith, with Bobby Jean Smith and Or Schreiber, 2 brilliant dancing members of AMOC, as equal participants. And in a way, they are the shadow or double figures of Julia and Connor as protagonists. Oh. And it's a staged and choreographed version of the Messiaen. It's part of Messiaen's trilogy of Tristan-influenced works that includes the Turangalila Symphony. One of my favorite things about the Ojai Festival is, at its best, it's a lab for the field. It's a creative lab. And we're getting this production first, and then it will be repeated next month at the Aix-en-Provence Festival. And several of the other things we're doing will be at Ojai first, and then the adventure and the reveal is in Ojai, and the working process is leading up to Ojai, the workshopping, but then it will begin to travel the world. A few years ago, and this is to Tom Morris, my predecessor's credit, Julia Bullock's with Taishan Sori, kind of musical reflection on the legacy of Josephine Baker, originated at Ojai and is
Oh, I
now
didn't know.
well traveled around the world. So this is part of
Sure.
that tradition. Matt O'Coin has written an hour-long piece called Family Dinner, which is for all of AMOC. And AMOC every summer goes on a retreat to Vermont, to a kind of idyllic rustic setting with a barn. And part of AMOC's retreat tradition is that they must, it's a fixed part of it, they all have collectively a multi-course dinner, and people present work and do creative and artistic toasts between each course. And Matt has written a concert piece, which is like a set of mini concertos involving every member of AMOC. And this will have its world premiere. It's commissioned by the Ojai Festival. The composer Anthony Chung has written a very substantial, about 45-minute song cycle, which will have its world premiere with Paul Appleby and Miranda Cookson and Anthony playing piano, which is called The Echoing of Tenses, which is all texts by contemporary Asian American poets. And one more, the incredible choreographer Bobby Jean Smith, whose recognition of her remarkable talents is skyrocketing right now, has created an hour-long work for many members of AMOC called Open Rehearsal, which uses an empty theater coming back to life with the tentativeness of rehearsal and creation as a metaphor for all of us returning to life as the pandemic, we hope, recedes. Right. And the music includes everything from Schubert to Connie Converse and Pete Seeger. And this work will also travel and have other iterations, but we just learned the amazing news that Bobby Jean Smith, this young American dancer choreographer, has just been commissioned to do an evening-long work for the Paris Opera Ballet next March. And if you can imagine a very adventurous young American woman choreographer creating an evening-long work for one of the biggest bastions of dance tradition.
Wow.
So you're right, they're a very exciting bunch, and this seems to be the moment of emergence.
Right. So do you think that the fact that Ojai is so contained within 4 days at the max, and that Ojai itself is small, kind of precious little gem, does that help to enable the sort of experimental profile, characteristic of the festival itself?
It's a great question, because I think you're touching on the heart of the experience. It's a destination festival in a small town. So if you go to it, you're there. You're not saying, and it takes place quite intensely over 4 days.
Right.
And one of our wonderful longtime attendees and board members actually said, what sets it apart is the immersion experience. You're there, and you don't say, I think I'll go to this one, but then I'll go to that one tomorrow. You're there, you have a festival pass, so you go. And it's one of the most willing and open audiences I've ever encountered. It's a little bit of, okay, let's see what you got, throw it at me. And the informality of Ojai, it's still almost implausible that it takes place in a town park in what's essentially a nice band shell.
Yeah.
in a very beautiful environment.
Right.
The valley itself has an amazing creative history to which the festival has added. So there's this informality, physical beauty, and then it's a very small center of town. It's basically 3 blocks, 4 blocks,
Right.
and
Tiny.
your odds of running into not just some of the artists, but all of the artists are
Right.
very high.
Right.
Buying ice cream or at a fabulous bookshop that's a couple of blocks away. Or actually, one of the nicest things, every off-duty artist attends everybody else's concerts. So the odds are really good, especially with 17 members of AMOC, that you're sitting with an artist next to you.
You don't have a choice, actually,
Yeah.
with 17 of them. Yeah. That was one of my questions, was what is your operations department must be going crazy with who's coming in, who's leaving, who's staying. Are they all coming at once? And
they're not all coming at once. This is the first time, through the most remarkable hard work, and hats off to Jennifer Chen, the executive director, and Kath Britton, who's the producer, and Mary McGowan, who's the company manager. This is the first AMOC project to include every single member of AMOC at the same time. But there's you don't have to do detective work. On the Friday night of the festival, Anthony Roth Costanzo is singing Akhenaten at the Met. On Saturday morning, he flies to Los Angeles, drives to Ojai, and on Saturday night, he participates in the concert in Ojai. It's a small part in that concert, and then the next day is his extended involvement, which is Sigismondo d'India, Philip Glass, and Vivaldi. So the comings and goings are tricky.
Yeah,
Working with 17 music directors, my slightly barbed comment is it's been very reassuring, because I was reminded that democracy actually can work despite the other signs in our larger world, because the AMOCers make it work. They are deeply committed to collective decision-making process.
This is maybe too general a question, but I'm really curious to know, having been immersed in both coasts, the music scene on each coast, East and West, can we make any sort of sweeping generalizations about the differences between the two sides of our world?
I think one can. I feel entirely at home in both places, so I don't want my citizenship in either New York or Southern California to be revoked. I think history weighs more heavily in New York, and memory weighs more heavily in New York than it does in Los Angeles. And there are advantages and disadvantages to both. There's still a kind of openness in Los Angeles to whatever is sort of thrown at you. And I have to take hats off in the musical world. The Los Angeles Philharmonic has led the way. So in a way, the biggest and oldest and most prominent institution for decades now has had a very high new music profile, and it's higher than ever. I mean, it's, Ojai and all the Los Angeles is bursting with new music groups. Every time I go, there's a new one I haven't heard of, and all doing really wonderful work. And now let me do a little bit of history. Julius Eastman, who's also getting a concert devoted to his music at this year's Ojai Festival, performed with Zubin Mehta and the Los Angeles Philharmonic in 2 concerts in 1970.
No.
And I not only I will reveal my age, but as a teenager, I not only attended those concerts, but I now have copies of the programs from the LA Phil and LA Times archives. And he did Hans Werner Henze's, oh God, I just went blank, not Alcimarron, but another work of Henze. But he also did the Peter Maxwell Davies 8 Songs for a Mad King. Essay on Pigs of Henze, Essay on Pigs with Julius Eastman and Zubin Mehta and the Los Angeles Philharmonic. So it does go way back.
Way back. Yeah.
And so that creates a certain environment. And the LA Opera has embraced new work. Their next season already includes the West Coast. They did the actual world premiere of Matt's Eurydice, Matt O'Coin's Eurydice. And in this fall, they're doing Rhiannon Giddens and Michael Abel's Omar, which is premiering this month at the Spoleto Festival.
Right.
So the major institutions, I would say, have often led the way. And I'm a big believer in music being an ecosystem of large creatures and small creatures, and the health is in all of them. And as I said earlier, LA has an astonishing number of new music groups that just keep popping up and are doing fantastic work. That's not a slight against New York, but I think there's an even more entrepreneurial, slightly frontier in the sense of openness, quality to new music life right now in Southern California than in New York.
I was just thinking the word frontier sounds just about right, because it fits with the whole American ethos of moving west and breaking new ground. And
well, and John Cage was a Los Angeles native, going further up the coast, Lou Harrison and all of these, inventive figures who weren't bound by history or tradition. I don't think it's entirely a coincidence.
We are now coming to the end of our conversation. First of all, I'm really, really jealous of you being out there. But secondly, I'm so impressed with what you're doing and with bringing this gang, this crazy gang of people in. It's just incredibly cool. I hate to sound like a, teeny bopper, but because I'm obviously not, but it's cool. It
has been, I have to say, huge fun working with them, and many of them I've known for a long time, and watching it coalesce in this particular way. I can't resist mentioning one other thing. AMOC invited the period instrument group Ruckus because there's a natural overlap. Doug Balliott, the bass player and composer, is in both AMOC and regularly with Ruckus, as is Emmy Ferguson, the flutist. And so I can't resist the being able to say, where else can you see AMOC and Ruckus?
Anyway, best of luck. I'm sure it will be a huge success, and as I will remain jealous for the through the month of June. And have fun, enjoy it. Sounds great.
Well, I will say you don't have to be entirely jealous. We can't replicate the climate, but the major events of the festival are all live streamed. So for everybody who's watching our conversation, please know that you can watch all of the main stage concerts of the festival at no cost online. And that's also, that's a lovely outcome of these recent difficult times, is just ready access to events worldwide.
So true.